Let's get underway. We have Leader Schumer coming over to join us, followed by Ranking Member Wyden, and then other senators will be gathering as well during the time of this spotlight hearing. I want to thank the witnesses very much for being here, and I want to thank Ranking Member Wyden from the Finance Committee for his participation in all of this. Our title is Climate Risk, Crashing Markets, the insurance crisis threatening the U.S. economy, and obviously the driving cause behind this insurance crisis is generally the weather upheaval created by climate change, but more directly the failure of Republican elected officials to take the problem of climate change seriously, which happens at the same time that they're taking enormous amounts of money from fossil fuel interests. So it's a very unfortunate combination. I will make a brief opening statement. We'll turn to the witnesses then, but I'll interrupt to let Senator Schumer say a few words when he gets here, and same with Ranking Member Wyden from the Finance Committee. And other than that, we'll just hear your testimony and then engage with you in questions. My opening statement is a pretty simple one. We've been warned now for years about an economic cascade that will take place, a little bit like dominoes knocking the next one over. The first domino is disruption of Earth's weather systems because of climate change. That knocks over the insurance industry business model. And the damage to the insurance industry business model is so profound that a board member of the largest insurance company on the planet, a German insurance company, said that he just does not see a way for the insurance business model to survive without meaningfully addressing climate change. And when that insurance model collapses, it cascades into real estate, and then it cascades into the general economy. And what he added that I had not thought of was that it actually cascades into hundreds and hundreds of complicated business transactions in which an insurance piece is a necessary part of the success of the transaction, and all of that falls apart. But the original witness that we had on this was from Freddie Mac, the big, ginormous mortgage company. And what he predicted was that disruption in weather systems would make insurance for properties unaffordable or unavailable. And then that would hit the mortgage markets, because without insurance, you can't get a mortgage. So mortgage markets then are the next domino to fall. And when you can't get a mortgage on property, then the property's value falls, either because you can't get a mortgage, so you can't find buyers, or because the carrying cost of what we'll hear about today, high insurance premiums, has gotten so great that it knocks down the value of properties. First Street, a research group, nonpartisan research group, has suggested that insurance premiums are going to increase 300 to 400% in the time of a mortgage. Some of them are already pretty high. We have Mayor Levy with us, and Miami-Dade County is at $17,000 on average. So if you triple that or quadruple that, you can see how a carrying cost of, say, $50,000 a year to pay for property insurance is going to knock down the value of the property dramatically. You're not just signing up for that property when you buy it, you're signing up for that $50,000 a year expense. So this is a very dangerous opening act of a play that does not end well for the American economy. The chief economist for Freddie Mac said that the conclusion was likely to be a 2008 style economic recession. You didn't have to have a bad mortgage in 2008 to be clobbered. Lots of Rhode Islanders were clobbered who had perfectly legit mortgages. What happened was that hit the whole national economy so hard that it drove us into a very severe recession, irrespective of good or bad mortgages. And that's what we're looking at here. He made that prediction based on a crash in coastal property values. And the witnesses from Florida will understand about coastal property risk. But in the meantime, we've seen the evil sibling of coastal property value risk stand up, and that's wildfire adjacent property value risk. And in fact, it may be that the wildfire risk is a greater danger to insurance markets than the coastal risk. But certainly, the two are both contenders. So that's the environment in which this hearing takes place. I'm sorry that it has to be Democrats only, but it's very hard to deal with the other party when the question is climate-driven problems, because frankly, they're led right now by a president who says that climate change is a hoax against all of the evidence, including classes that are taught in the university that he went to. So, but in any event, here we are, and I'm delighted that the witnesses are here. Dr. Mulder, why don't you go ahead first? I appreciate very much the work of you and Dr. Keyes. You've both been very articulate in describing the risk, and I asked you to proceed.
Thank you, Senator. And I want to thank Senator Wyden, Senator Whitehouse, members of the committee for the opportunity to testify on the current challenges facing the U.S. homeowners insurance market. My name is Philip Mulder, and I'm an assistant professor of risk and insurance at the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Wisconsin School of Business. My research focuses on how the homeowners insurance market is changing and the impact of those changes on real estate markets. I will be direct. Homeowners insurance is becoming more expensive even as it becomes harder to find a reliable policy. Using a new data set of homeowners insurance premiums from 84 million mortgage escrow payments, Professor Benjamin Keyes and I found that the average homeowner's premium increased by 48% between 2020 and 2024. There are many factors that have contributed to these trends, including increases in the cost of building materials and labor. However, our research also shows an unmistakable connection between disaster risk and rising premiums. While inflation-adjusted premiums only increased by 20% in relatively low-risk areas, they increased by more than 40% in the zip codes that are most exposed to wildfires and hurricanes. In terms of insurance availability, data collected by the Senate Budget Committee shows rising insurance non-renewal rates even as policies became more expensive. From 2020 to 2023, the rate of policyholders dropped by their insurer doubled from 0.5% to 1% per year, representing an additional 423,000 policyholders who lost their coverage. Just like premiums, the rise in policy non-renewal has been highest in the markets with the most risk. In short, the insurance affordability and availability challenges facing homeowners go hand in hand, especially in the communities with the most risk. These trends are affecting homeowners nationwide. According to our data in Oklahoma, the cost of homeowners insurance has increased by more than 50% in the last 5 years and by more than 80% in Colorado. While most homeowners, fortunately, will never lose their home in a disaster, almost all of them pay for homeowners insurance at a price that nonetheless reflects increasing risk. When I talk to people who work in insurance, I often hear that what they are really selling customers is peace of mind. Life insurance that your family will be taken care of, home insurance that you'll be able to recover if you lose your home in a disaster. In recent years, insurance has gone from being a source of safety to a source of stress. Beyond hurricanes and wildfires, homeowners now face new risks that their premiums will become unaffordable or that they will lose their coverage. The other witnesses here today can tell you about the personal hardships created by this market turmoil. At a broader level, academic research shows that costly homeowners insurance is having systematic effects on real estate markets. Rising premiums contribute to slower home price growth. As homeowners face higher premiums, they are increasingly falling behind on their mortgage payments and reducing their coverage. Underinsurance, in turn, slows disaster recovery and leads survivors to sell their property after a total loss instead of rebuilding. In many cases, underinsured disaster survivors turn to crowdfunding or public disaster assistance to recover. In short, stress in the homeowners insurance market ripples through the communities and real estate markets that it normally supports. To some extent, the pressure in the insurance market reflects the fallout from years of growing insured losses. The rising cost of homeowners insurance is a reminder that climate change creates real costs for households' budgets by increasing the risk and uncertainty surrounding natural disasters. This means that mitigating greenhouse gas emissions is not just an environmental issue, but also something that will affect long-run housing affordability and the health of the mortgage market. Alongside mitigation, there is growing urgency to adapt our homes, businesses, and infrastructure to make them more resilient against rising disaster risk. Effective adaptation requires action not just by individual homeowners, but also by states, cities, and local governments. With enough resources, it is possible to build homes that are remarkably resilient. However, there is little value in your home surviving a natural disaster if the rest of the community around it has been destroyed. Programs like FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, which was abruptly canceled last month, can help vulnerable communities with limited resources make upfront investments to limit disaster losses rather than relying on federal aid after disasters strike. While it is easy to say we need to adapt, it is harder to know which adaptation measures are actually cost-effective. Evidence-based policymaking will require data on premiums and claims like that collected by the U.S. Treasury's Federal Insurance Office and the National Association of Insurance Commissioners to evaluate what really works to reduce losses to insurers and costs to homeowners. As many states and localities try different policies to reduce their risk, even a modest investment in data collection and research could yield massive benefits by helping policymakers to set better construction standards and home buyers to choose safer homes. The public sector has an important role to play in data collection efforts that facilitate adaptation. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks very much. I'm going to interrupt the testimony of the witnesses for a moment. Mayor Levy, you'd ordinarily be next, but the Democratic leader has arrived, as has the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, so I'm going to turn to them for their remarks. Senator Schumer.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for indulging us, and Ms. Hill and Mr. Neaton, thank you. And Dr. Mulder, thank you for your excellent testimony. First, I want to salute Sheldon Whitehouse. He has been our leader on climate issues of all kinds. He has been our leader in understanding the corrosive power of dark money leads to the kinds of things we're talking about, what went on in the House today. And he has been the beacon in pointing out another devastating effect of climate change, and that is on the insurance market. Climate change is decimating the homeowners' insurance markets with huge effects on individuals. We all know that a home is your piece of the rock. People struggle to buy a home. They know when they put their payments down for a mortgage, they're building equity, unlike rental. And one of the greatest complaints we have from the young people about the status of America in 2025 is the inaffordability to buy a home. So imagine if you can't buy a home, or imagine if you can't sell a home, because the insurance market is in such disaster because of climate. Last year, natural disasters inflicted $218 billion in economic damage, insured losses totaling $113 billion. New York State alone had 40 record-breaking tornadoes. We never used to. When I was a kid, tornadoes were for Oklahoma. Now they're all over the country. And it's all because of the changes in climate. Prices for insurance are getting out of reach. Insurers don't want to pay when climate can do such devastation to homes, whether it's through hurricanes, whether it's tornadoes, whether it's flooding, or any other kind of natural disaster. And when you can't get insurance, you can't buy a home. People who have saved their money so they could buy a home and then told the insurance cost put it out of reach are just furious. And it is our job and your job, and that's why this spotlight hearing is so important, to show them why, to let America know why. It's because of the climate crisis, because of climate change. And what will happen if the House gets their way in reducing or even, in effect, eliminating the tax breaks for wind and solar, which the three of us all worked on so hard in the IRA? It'll get much worse. So Donald Trump says he wants to reduce costs on day one. Donald Trump and his Republicans are raising costs. They're raising costs for electricity because they are decimating the clean tax credits, but probably even worse, particularly for younger Americans who want to buy a home, or older Americans who are about to retire and want to sell their home so they can have a lower costs in maintaining where they live, it'll be even more devastating. So this hearing, this spotlight hearing is vital. It should echo from one end of America to the other, because again, the insurance crisis is bad and getting worse and worse and worse, and after today, worse still because of what the House is trying to do. So again, I want to thank Senator Whitehouse. He's, as I said, he has alerted me to this issue. He's been a beacon on this issue, and that we are not going to stop until people realize the homeowner crisis, the homeowner insurance crisis, is exactly a repercussion of what dark money is doing to the Republican Party and now to the House of Representatives. Thank you, Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much, Senator Schumer. Appreciate you being here and your attention to this grave concern. It's hitting New Yorkers as well as everyone else. With that, I'll turn to Senator Wyden, ranking member of our Senate Finance Committee.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse, and I too want to welcome our guests and make sure that people understand that Senator Whitehouse has been our go-to person in the United States Senate. There are a bunch of us that care deeply about climate change, and I'll mention one area that is a priority this week, but there is nothing that competes with the fact that Sheldon Whitehouse goes to the floor of the United States Senate again and again and again to spotlight, which is what we're doing here, all of the big challenges here. And the reality is the fight this week, today, is about one thing in particular, and I spent 10 years on it, and that is the technology-neutral feature of the clean energy tax credits. Because we had heard all about all of the ways to make decisions, but I said, nobody's doing what Sheldon Whitehouse has always been interested in, which is to follow the science. And nobody knows what the big carbon reducers are going to be 20 years from now. So let's do something that brings science into this and creates the incentives to go out and pioneer in this space. And so that's what this new debate is all about, because the Republicans want to wash their hands of technology neutrality. They don't really want to compete in markets and in an arrangement where science is going to come up with new and more exciting ways to reduce carbon. All they want to do is give the brakes to their big guys and their friends, and we can't afford to do that. I am here because just a few weeks ago, a constituent in Sisters, Oregon, told me that she had saved up for years and bought a home, but basically she and other people so situated are having trouble getting insurance because of the fire risk. And we're talking about people who can't get insurance at any price, literally. I mean, it's one thing to, it's going through the roof, but it's quite another to know that they can't get insurance at any price. And with a record 1.9 million acres burned last year in my state, the insurance concerns are really increasingly the #1 question I get when I have town hall meetings and when I get with constituents. And beyond the fact that the Trumpers want to walk away from this idea of technology neutrality and energy development, voluntary incentives, no mandates, the more you reduce carbon, the bigger your tax savings. Now they want to get rid of the Federal Insurance Office, which we think at least ought to give out some pretty good data because they collect it. And it's really been a struggle getting them to move ahead with this. So we continue to push for that. But at the end of the day, this is about whether we can create a political juggernaut for this cause in terms of rising insurance rates as a result of climate change. And as far as I'm concerned, and this is why I'm here today, when you're here with Sheldon Whitehouse, who's led this cause, you are running with the right crowd. So I'm glad to be here. This is going to be a huge issue for the Senate Finance Committee. We have some issues that touch on taxes, some that don't. But at the end of the day, we've got the most influential United States senator who's worked on this issue on the committee, and we're going to be working closely with him until we win this. Thank you, Sheldon.
Thanks very much, Ron. Let me turn now to Mayor Levy, who is coming to us live from the great city of Hollywood, Florida.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Mayor Levy.
Good afternoon, Senator Wyden and Senator
I
Whitehouse.
think we may need to adjust your volume or
You're not
have you
there.
unmute where we don't have sound.
Is this better?
Tech people are rushing to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, the
One moment while we solve the problem.
microphone is on. now? Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Should be working.
Never been in this room when it's been so quiet.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Turn off the mics, it quiets right up.
There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, great. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Senator Wyden, Senator Whitehouse. Good afternoon to all the members of the committee. I really appreciate and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Josh Levy, and I do serve as the mayor of Hollywood, Florida. I also serve on the Broward County Planning Council, our local tourism development council, and as chair pro tem of the Elected Officials Council of Career Source Broward, which is our regional workforce board that is responsible for administering the mission of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that was passed by Congress some years ago. City of Hollywood is a city of over 154,000 residents. We're Florida's 11th largest city by population, and we also represent the second largest economy in Broward County, and we're located just 20 minutes north of Miami, to give you reference. We are a major hub for healthcare and for tourism, but like many communities in South Florida, we are facing overlapping climate-driven pressures that are placing extreme stress on our residents and municipal resources. And chief among those, as you might guess, is of course Florida's broken property insurance market. Just over the past 5 years, our residents have seen their windstorm property insurance premiums more than double, often very dramatically. For example, my own premium jumped for homeowners coverage, jumped from $3,200 a year to over $7,000 in a single year, and it keeps rising. And for others, rates have surged from $10,000 to over $20,000 annually. And these increases, they're pushing households, especially retirees and those on fixed incomes, to the brink. Condominium owners who were once protected by affordable shared policies now face mounting costs due to state-imposed reserve requirements and insurance hikes. Beyond premiums, insurance carriers, like I'm hearing from other testimony, are routinely denying renewals unless, in our case in Florida, homeowners replace their roofs. And even if the roof is watertight and structurally sound, they're still calling for a roof replacement. And what, of course, as you can imagine, once a resident cannot afford a full roof replacement just in time to renew a policy, they're often subjected to force-placed insurance by their lenders at even higher costs. And so in response to the crisis here in Florida, Floridians have called for legislative action. And while the state legislature here has, discussed reforms and talked about litigation and reinsurance access, the measures that they put in place have not yet yielded any real or broad-based rate relief whatsoever in the state of Florida. The market remains unstable. Major insurers have also exited the state, and Citizens Property Insurance Corporation, which is the state-run insurer supposed to be of last resort, now holds more than 1 million policies of its own, and even Citizens is raising rates and narrowing coverage. And so the result for us in Florida is clear. Housing continues to become unaffordable, not only due to rising property value, but also because of the cost to insure homes is outpaced by household income. In Hollywood, where the median income is around $62,000 a year, many residents now spend more on insurance than they do on their property tax or even on their mortgage principal. So the affordability crisis affects, again, more than just individuals. It, by the cascading effect, impacts our local entire economy. And so cost-burdened residents, obviously have to reduce their spending. Property values can be eroded, and local government, loses critical revenue to maintain essential services and infrastructure. And at the city level, as you can imagine, we're doing our part, partnering to build affordable housing and reforming zoning codes and investing in infrastructure. But there is little that we can do to directly address the insurance affordability without legislative intervention. At the same time, we're facing escalating climate impacts of our own. You talked about wildfire-prone areas. Well, Hollywood is a low-lying coastal city already experiencing the very real impact of sea level rise. We see it, and we have it on our streets and roads, and it impacts our houses. More intense rainfall and more frequent tidal flooding are an everyday and every month and every year occurrence. Rain events that once brought a few inches of rain now bring over a foot of water in just hours. And so we're facing a nearly $2 billion bill for stormwater infrastructure upgrade needs. And we also have to convert, for example, older neighborhoods from septic to public sewer to better manage wastewater more safely. And these investments, they are essential not only for climate adaptation, but to help ensure that our city remains insurable. So I do want to thank the committee for bringing national attention to this crisis. We certainly do need legislative action to stabilize, at the very least, Florida's property insurance market, whether that's through reinsurance programs or national catastrophe backstops, greater regulatory oversight, or incentives to restore competition and balance the marketplace. This affordability emergency, which is driven by the climate change impacts and insurance instability that results from that, threatens the ability of people to live and invest in our communities. And I thank you again for your time and attention, and look forward to working with you to help protect the livability and resilience of cities like Hollywood. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you being with us. Our next witness is Diana Hill, a homeowner from Wilmington, North Carolina, who worked as a paralegal until her retirement in 2010 and brings firsthand experience to us of the North Carolina insurance market. Ms. Hill, please proceed.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Diana Hill. I'm 84 years old and have lived in Wilmington, North Carolina for 31 years. I'm originally from Ohio. Like many seniors, my income relies entirely on Social Security. My story is not as unique as I wish it were. My son, Brian Hill, passed away last summer at the age of 59. I had not realized how often this grief happens to seniors until it happened to me. I have two other wonderful adult children, Kara and Thaddeus, and with them, Brian was my protector and, when necessary, one of my providers. As parents age, we are more likely to lose our adult children, who would naturally be our safety nets. It's a double whammy when, as a senior, you lose your child. In the past 20 years, I've owned my home in Wilmington. For many of us, our home is more than shelter. It is a harbor, haven, sanctuary, asylum, retreat, and memories. That's why so many of us have to be cajoled and sometimes forced into leaving our homes if we become infirm. As more climate-caused events are predicted, increases in homeowners insurance has become a national crisis. North Carolina has been in the crosshairs of increased ratings. In Wilmington, about 7 years ago, we experienced Hurricane Florence. Florence was only a Category 1 hurricane, but she did what many tourists in North Carolina do. She came and she stayed. But she dumped over 30 inches of rain into Wilmington. Many houses were demolished, more were damaged, needing significant repairs. Although Florence cost our city over $31 million, it cost the state over $17 billion in damages. Then last year, Helene, a Category 4 hurricane, arrived. The billions of dollars to repair Western North Carolina is just the quantifiable loss that can be identified after that unprecedented storm. Changes in climate are going to increase weather events. Although not everyone believes in climate change, insurance companies do. It seems to me that whenever there is a significant weather event like Florence and Helene, the insurance companies expect approval to increase our premiums to pay for those losses. It's almost like we're on a pay-as-you-go plan. First, we pay the premium, then the loss, then the claim, then the increase of premiums to cover the costs of the loss. We old-timers paid when there was very little threat to insurance companies' bottom line, and now we're paying even more. Many of us seniors, if not hurting, at least are struggling to keep up with the cost of protecting our homes. For those of us on a fixed income, it's tough. As my property value has increased, so have my insurance premiums. My homeowner's insurance increases about 10% every year. Whether I have a claim or whether there is a significant weather event doesn't appear to impact the premium increases. For those of us living east of I-95, we are required to carry coverage for windstorm, hail, or a named storm, which includes a pretty heavy deductible. This year, my property insurance premiums were $2,357, almost one full month of my Social Security check. In 2025 and 2026 will be another 10% increase for property insurance. Now I weigh the increased cost of property insurance versus being underinsured, keeping my fingers crossed. I'm lucky. I have no mortgage payments, so I can control whether I want to insure my house for the total replacement value or save money on premiums. Admittedly, it is a gamble, but a gamble that a senior on a fixed income must consider. Those seniors who are still paying mortgages out of their fixed incomes have no choice but to deal with higher mortgage payments. The need for us seniors to stay in our homes and protect our only financial asset seem to hold us hostages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hill. And our final witness is Rocky Neaton, a homeowner from Houston, Texas, who is also a commercial and fine art photographer, so he brings the experience of not only being a homeowner, but a small business owner in his insurance market. Mr. Neaton, please proceed.
Yes, and thank you, Senator Whitehouse, for inviting me today to testify. And again, my name is Rocky Neaton. I'm a native Texan. I've lived in Texas my whole life except for one summer internship in Tucson, Arizona. I'm a commercial and fine art photographer, as you said, and my current plan is to retire in November of this year. I've lived in the Houston area for 41 years. I've been in my current home for 29 years, which is a 1,200 square foot arts and crafts bungalow. I'm inside Loop 610, and I can see the downtown skyscrapers from my front porch. The cost of insuring my home has been consistent over many years, but there have been significant premium increases in the last half dozen years. From 2018 through 2020, my premiums averaged about $1,900 for the year. They have stepped up since then. In 2021, I paid $2,505 for my homeowner's insurance. In 2023, after my broker notified me that my premium would be going up again, I found a different insurer with a reputation for good customer service that could keep me at roughly the same premium. But the rate increases kept coming. In 2024, I paid $2,660. My premium for 2025 is $2,705, but it would have been $3,136 had I not increased my deductibles from 1% to 2%. That means my deductible will be just over $5,000 for this year. I'm going to have higher financial risk from the damaging hurricanes and severe storms that seem to be more common in recent years. And I was also informed that my insurer will not offer the 1% deductible next year, even if I wanted it. I'm paying more and getting less. And it's just not the homeowner's insurance that has rising premiums. In 2020, my auto premiums were $1,080. In 2025, for the same vehicle with no claims, they are $1,304, but again, that's with a doubling of the deductible from $500 to $1,000 in order to save money. To get the best rates on home and auto, I'm taking advantage of the bundling and auto pay discounts, or the rates would be even higher. And it's the same with my business insurance. As a small business, it's imperative that I manage overhead costs. I've been with the same insurance company for over 25 years, and I've never filed a claim. My premiums would have increased $400 this year, so I was forced to find another insurer. And it's just not me. A colleague of mine built an office and digital production workspace on his property in 2016, but his insurer is dropping him. The reason given is that they don't want to cover the frame construction of his building, even though it is relatively new and built to modern codes. He thinks his insurer simply wants out of the market. And since I'm planning on retiring this year, I must decide whether I can live in my current home on a fixed income with rising insurance costs, or sell and relocate. A realtor who's advising me says that my home would be attractive to first-time buyers, but the cost of insurance is a factor intimidating or even shutting out many buyers interested in a house like mine. He has also noted insurers are making stricter demands on properties to cover, like requiring roof replacement at 10 years instead of the more traditional 25 years. So due to recent severe storms in Texas, including the large hailstorms over urban areas, the derecho windstorm in Houston last year, tornadoes, rapidly forming hurricanes in the Gulf, and wildfires in drought-stricken West Texas, I may not be able to relocate in Texas and avoid high insurance costs or the expensive property updates to get a policy. I may even face fewer companies in Texas offering policies. So as a retiree, I may find myself between the proverbial rock and the hard place if I want to be able to afford to stay in my home state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our chair for this hearing has gone to vote. I apologize for the fact that we're all in and out. That's what happens when we try to run these spotlight hearings at the same time that we're voting. But I appreciate all of you being here. I think this is the case that everyone's had a chance to speak now. Good. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my questions while I have the opportunity and just give you all a chance to weigh in on these. The rising cost of homeowners insurance is obviously a problem, as you have identified, and it's a problem that's growing, and it's growing fast. And homeowners just can't catch a break here. Someone finally saves enough money for a down payment. On top of their mortgage payment, there's homeowners insurance that now, on average across the country, costs about $200 a month. So that just means that much less mortgage that they can manage. In some areas, however, the costs are even higher. In Texas, the average monthly, and that's across the whole state, not just down in Houston where there's more flooding risk than there is across the state, it's actually closer to about $400 a month, the data show. Homeowners who live in areas that are prone to flooding, like Florida, will need a separate flood insurance policy. On average in Florida, that now costs $760 a month, month after month after month, on top of your mortgage, or if you've retired and paid off your home, it's still month after month after month for your insurance. So, Mr. Neaton, you live in an area prone to flooding in Texas. You've talked about, can you just do a summary here for everyone about how your homeownership rates have changed over time? And more directly, how has this affected your ability just to make ends meet?
Well, yes. I looked at my 2010 premium versus today, and it's doubled.
So you've doubled in basically under 15 years.
Right. And it would be even worse if I didn't accept that 2% deductible versus a 1% deductible.
So it's more than doubled, because while your monthly has doubled, you now buy less insurance than you were buying back in 2010.
Yes.
That is, you have less coverage.
I'm at higher risk.
You've got to be out of pocket for anything that goes wrong.
Exactly.
To a bigger extent.
Exactly.
Wow. So how does this affect you on a day-to-day basis, a month-to-month basis?
Well, it drives up the cost of home ownership, and that's less money going into savings for retirement, or maybe just having a little fun money for a vacation. It's going to the insurance company.
That's right. And actually it's a very good point. Instead of money that goes back into your community, if you're able to spend it on restaurants and buying things in your community, instead it's going to an insurance company, because they've got to put together a pool of money to be able to insulate against the next time that we see floods in the region. I really appreciate your highlighting this and bringing a personal face to it. In my home state of Massachusetts, home insurance rates went up 16% just last year, in just 1 year across the board. We can't fix our housing crisis without fixing skyrocketing insurance costs. But the Trump administration is currently going in exactly the wrong direction. President Trump wants to eliminate the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, which administers the National Flood Insurance Program and helps provide access for flood insurance for homeowners who need it. And just last week, President Trump fired the FEMA acting administrator for daring to say that FEMA should not be eliminated. His administration also announced that it is ending FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities, or the BRIC program. This program provides hazard mitigation funding to communities and families across the country to help cover the costs of making their roads and bridges and homes more resilient to natural disasters. These attacks on federal disaster mitigation and on relief programs and threats to dismantle FEMA will raise insurance costs even higher. It will not lower them, and it's going to make the housing affordability crisis even worse. So, Mayor Levy, you lead a town of over 154,000 people in an area that has also been hit hard by flooding. How will reducing the flood mitigation assistance programs affect your community and other small towns across this country?
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question. Indeed, if folks don't have an opportunity to mitigate their risk and leave themselves more vulnerable to the more frequent flooding that we see, and it doesn't even take a hurricane anymore, we have a lot more frequent high-intensity rainfall events that without a windstorm component have dropped over 20 inches of rain in a 24-hour period over our region. It shuts down our economy for days until the water recedes. And for those folks who can't, to your point, mitigate and elevate their homes or protect their homes with better mitigating opportunities to protect the structure, then of course that leaves them more vulnerable to additional loss at the next storm. So if the storms are more frequent, the rainfall is more frequent and intense, if we don't have an opportunity to make our structures less vulnerable, then we're just going to have continuing losses and increasing insurance loss. So one way to stop that, as you're deftly pointing out in your question, is to learn from mistakes and build stronger and mitigate the opportunity for loss to our economy and to our cities and our households here. And it's really terrible to not have that opportunity for people to do that.
Right. I really appreciate your putting it that way. You're really talking about a downward spiral here, and that not having access to flood mitigation finances to be able to help rebuild or to build in a more resilient way, how that just makes every problem associated with flooding and associated with homeownership even worse. I want to ask just one final question here, and that's for you, Dr. Mulder, and that is, I'm just trying to think through what the Trump administration is really up to here. We all know what the problem is, right? That climate change is increasing the severity of these weather events. That's causing more flooding, more wildfires, problems in a lot of different areas, and that's driving up insurance rates. So I just want to know, will closing down FEMA actually stop those problems for homeowners and for communities that are experiencing them?
Thank you for the question. I can't speak to every detail that goes into these very fast-changing policies, but certainly FEMA plays a critical role in terms of providing both assistance before disaster strikes as well as after disaster strikes. And having that sort of coordination at a larger level is very important for resiliency. Certainly, ending FEMA is not going to end disasters. And I share some of your sentiments about the FEMA BRIC program. As I mentioned in my testimony, that's an example of investments that could yield high payoffs in terms of reducing what we have to spend after a disaster by making the right investments before a disaster.
Yeah, well, President Trump's magical thinking that if he just ends FEMA, that there won't be any emergencies and no one will need any of the FEMA help shows just how out of step this president is. Before FEMA's acting administrator was ousted, he wrote a memo outlining the steps that the president could take to significantly reduce the number of emergency declarations that the president approves, and thus the amount of federal assistance sent to cities and states hit by natural disasters. In other words, just declare national emergencies only at a higher threshold. Doesn't change how much people are actually injured and how much communities are suffering. But the Trump administration is breaking the federal government's commitment to helping families rebuild after a disaster and to make their homes more resilient in preparation for the next one. This is just going to be one more step in accelerating the increasing cost of homeowners insurance. It is past time to fix the insurance crisis, the homeownership crisis, but also the resiliency crisis that we face in this country. So again, thank you for holding this hearing. Thank you to the ranking member for doing that.
Thank you, Senator Warren, for being here, and really appreciate it. And next, let me turn to our ranking member on the Senate Budget Committee, and an ardent climate advocate, Jeff Merkley.
Yeah, greetings, and thank you very much for organizing this spotlight hearing. And in my state of Oregon, the issue that is catching everyone's attention is how fires are affecting property insurance. And it's very parallel to the situation with flooding. That is that companies are raising rates a lot, an average of about 30% since 2020. And they're not writing new policies in more fire-prone areas. They don't seem to have withdrawn from the market to the degree that it's happened in California, but it feels like they're on the edge of doing so. And homeowners, property owners are facing the fact that if they sell a property, try to sell their house, and the buyer can't get insurance, then they can't get a mortgage, because that would be a new policy, a new policy to go with a new mortgage. That the value of their property drops a lot. So there's a lot of concern about the insurance market just becoming very dysfunctional. So, Professor, I wanted to get your insights on the fire side of this equation. Are companies that aren't writing new policies, are they losing money on their existing policies? Is this, if so, why haven't they canceled existing policies? Are they just trying to raise their rates in Oregon to compensate for their losses in California or their losses in the Gulf states? So as places like Oregon are subsidizing other parts of the country. And to the degree that people can't get insurance and it affects their own mortgage or the ability of somebody to buy their property, how do we solve this?
Certainly, yes. Thank you, Senator. Wildfire is a very salient risk in this case in the growing homeowners insurance crisis. It has one of the clearest links with rising temperatures. Obviously, these climate models project uncertainty in both directions about what will happen to a variety of risks. But with wildfire, it's growing temperatures. It's going to increase the severity of wildfires. That's one of the clear predictions. And so what I think I see some insurers and the reinsurers in these states thinking is maybe our models have been undershooting. Maybe we need to catch up. So when they see these incidents of very high losses, it increases the amount of uncertainty. They become it's not just risk anymore. It's, are we writing profitable policies or not? And so there's a bit of like a risk-averse approach, right? They raise premiums to be on the safe side and to see how this is all really going to evolve. And they're also pulling back in the amount of coverage that they're writing. I think that every insurer in this case is going to look a little bit different in terms of their strategy, but for homeowners, that translates into a lot of uncertainty and churn in the market.
So the state has attempted to help people by introducing support for risk reduction programs, which is essentially homeowners or owners of homes reducing the vegetation around the house, making sure their vents can't suck in sparks, making sure their type of roof is resistant, all shrubbery a certain distance from the house, a whole bunch of things of that nature. Has that proven effective do insurance companies really take notice of that? Do they offer a significant subsidy for that, or can they be convinced to do so?
So certainly there's a lot of evidence that these types of adaptation measures are very effective in terms of reducing claims. And so, this is going to be an important area of policy focus going forward. I think that from homeowners' perspectives, it's already very hard to shop around for a policy and to realize that you're finding the best rate, that you're finding the coverage that you need. Add on to this now, you need to document exactly which sorts of ways that your home is adapted. So where I think that, say, a state government can play a really productive role is in sort of documenting these standards. And I've even seen in some states like Alabama with a certified roof program that they will reach arrangements with the insurers about what discounts having this kind of standard brings them for their policies. So I think that creates more certainty for the homeowners, lets them know what kind of discount you can get by implementing these measures. Certainly in a competitive marketplace, again, each insurer might be acting differently. Some insurers might find it expensive to say, go out and actually look at the way that your home is fortified or not fortified. They just prefer to offer a blanket premium. So I do think that there's some role for coordination in terms of making sure that this reduction in risk, which is real and effective, does translate into premium savings for homeowners.
Okay, so that's certainly an area that the state can work on in helping homeowners. Another area is whether there needs to be a state insurer of last resort or a federal insurer of last resort. The way with flood insurance, we haven't found a great model so far. We've seen a little bit of what Florida and California have done, but once there's a reason for the insurance companies to stay out as they do risk evaluation, it's probably going to be an expensive undertaking. But is there a model you would recommend for an insurer of last resort? And does the state or the feds providing such a program encourage private companies to dump their highest risk and put it onto the federal program?
So I think that, the details of any such program would be complicated, and that's kind of where the real tension would lie in terms of knowing what's going to work, what's not going to work, what would the costs relative to the benefits be. What I do think is a challenge, and we've seen this with California's FAIR Plan for state-run insurers of last resort, is the logic of an insurer is to pool your risk. And when you're running one of these insurers at the state level, you're not really pooling your risk. That means that often these insurers of last resort will turn to reinsurance markets. Those can be very expensive. Those costs get passed through the homeowners. The logic of a federal system is that you can pool the risk more broadly. Exactly to your point, though, the question is, how do you avoid that becoming something that sort of leads to perhaps inadvertently subsidizing growth in high-risk areas or not incentivizing the kind of adaptation you'd hope for? I think that there are models out there where you can bring an amount of sort of pricing into a program like that where you're still able to lower costs for homeowners, increase availability, but at the same time still acknowledge these growing risks.
Okay, well, thank you. It's quite a dilemma, and it's coming up in my town halls quite a lot as people say, hey, between the rising costs that I can't afford, isn't there something you can do? And so we're pondering that, and I take the point you're making. One of the things that's been a little bit puzzling is it appears that some of the companies that have been deciding not to renew policies or to not do new policies, the value of the companies seem to be going up. That is, they're multi-billion-dollar companies, but for example, State Farm, which has the largest share of Oregon's property insurance market, was worth $131 billion in early 2024, an increase of $7 billion over a 4-year span. Progressive and Allstate have seen the increases in their market value. So they don't seem to be going bankrupt. I mean, you might have expected, oh, wow, because of the fires that have happened out west in multiple states, these companies are in big trouble, so they're really justified in cutting their losses. But it appears like they're doing just fine. What am I missing here? If they're doing just fine, then are they just being way too risk adverse?
So I think that the key difference between an insurer and sort of the perspective of, say, a policymaker, a leader, a homeowner, insurers operate year by year. They only write annual contracts. And that means that when the risks get too big, when they don't feel like they can set the right rates, when they decide to just be more profitable to deploy their capital elsewhere, they can do that, basically at a moment's notice. Of course, the cities, the people who live there, still need insurance. And these are businesses, so they're not going to wait around for their profits to fall and fall and fall. If they recognize, if they can see on the horizon that now's not the time to be writing insurance in these communities, they'll stop. And the regulators want to see financially sound companies as well. And so that's part of what they're optimizing for too. But again, that's a reminder that we can't treat the problem of available homeowners insurance as just an individual problem entirely. These markets can dry up, and meanwhile, the communities are still left needing insurance.
Well, I appreciate your responses. I want to turn to our homeowners who are really between the rock and the hard place, and unfortunately didn't arrive in time to hear your testimony, but I'm imagining you've run into difficulty getting insurance, or have you seen significant increases in the cost? When I hear from my constituents in my town halls, and I do one in every county every year, so I've held 36 town halls, people come and say, yeah, my insurance, it went up X amount, always large sums, or that they're canceling it and I'm trying to find another company. Are these the types of challenges you've all encountered? If you want to maybe repeat information you've already given, but just to summarize what your concern is, what your experience is, and what your concern is. That would be fine.
Yes, Senator Merkley, as when Senator Warren was here, I mentioned that from 2010 to today, my premium has more than doubled. So that, as I mentioned to her, that's money that I'm not saving for retirement, or that's money that's I'm not spending it. I'd sure like to have a new car right now, but I'm not going to be able to do that as I'm headed right to the edge of retirement. If I may, you mentioned those companies, State Farm and Allstate. And I have a connection to a law firm in Houston that does take on insurance companies, and I was told those are the two companies they sue the most. So there's a lot of claim denial going on, I would suppose, in that situation.
They're sued because they're trying not to pay out when a fire affects or a flood affects a property.
Yeah, exactly. If it please the committee, I have a good friend of over 30 years. She started a real estate business 25 years ago. She's in Friendswood, Texas, which is between Houston and Galveston. She's probably selling more homes more in the coastal region than, and I'm right in Central City. But she has a whole list of bullet points of problems she's having, either helping buyers or sellers due to insurance issues. And a lot of it is like the buyers set out, they calculate their taxes, their mortgage, their insurance, and then they put in earnest money, and then they can't get that same quote, or there's a technicality that they won't get a policy from that insurer, and they may lose their their earnest money. And she's finding that sellers are having difficulty selling in terms of getting insurance if the roof is more than 5 years old. And these roofs are designed to be 25, 30 years old and withstand, So I can get insurance because I put a new roof on in 2022, so I'm kind of lucky. But I would hate to see what my situation would be if not. She says if the roofs are over 16 years old, you have to buy insurance from the Texas Fair Plan or Texas Windstorm Insurance, which are government supported. Those rates are high and the coverage is poor.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure any information that she'd like to provide, we could add to the record from this hearing. And Ms. Hill, is there anything you'd like to add about your experience?
Well, I had testified that between my homeowners and my property insurance, it was almost my entire Social Security check for 1 month. Something that's happened due to climate change, I don't think we've touched on this, is that in our area, I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is right on the coast of North Carolina. So a lot of property that used to not be considered flood zones are now considered flood zones. They've been rezoned. And so those people now have to have flood insurance on top of all the other insurance that they hadn't ever anticipated. And I can't tell you the year, but a few years back, a whole community, a whole subdivision was not considered to be in the flood zone. And so it flooded anyway. And the whole community lost all the houses. I mean, the whole subdivision was lost. So it's really interesting. I mean, you can look at the maps of what was flood zone or was not flood zone and what is now and see what climate change has done to all of our areas. Even if we're near the Mississippi or the Ohio River, you don't have to be on the coast to see a difference. But that's the only thing I would add.
Well, thank you, and it really points to the broader theme here. My questions to the professor were really along the line of how do we help people solve their insurance problem, but the bigger picture here isn't about that. It's about how the insurance problem is creating a very dysfunctional market, setting the stage for significant economic collapses that Senator Whitehouse has been laying out as down the road. I must just mention, though, that I have a particular affection for Wilmington because I did an iron distance triathlon there and was the first member of Congress to ever do one. And I survived and made it across the finish line. So I always think of Wilmington with the relief I felt when I crossed that finish line. And I imagine some of what I saw, because that was quite a few years ago, are communities that are now gone in what you're describing.
Right. Well, please come back. Last year, we had Mrs. Biden, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, and Tim Walz in Wilmington. So we love Democrats coming to Wilmington.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks very much, Senator Merkley. Let me start my questioning with Mayor Levy. Your testimony says you've got $2 billion in infrastructure you're going to have to build to deal with sea level rise. Just for starters, there's not much debate about sea level rise, is it? You measure it on the pilings the same way you measure your growing kids on the doorway. It's a matter of rulers and inches and just adjust for tides. So there's no real debate about what's happening with sea level rise, is there?
There cannot be a debate, Senator. It's here and now and visible to the eye, as you mentioned, right? The water is there.
So you talked about $2 billion in infrastructure requirements, plus an entirely different set of obligations with respect to sewer hookups, because the other forms of disposing of waste don't work very well when flooded. What do you think the total cost? I assume that the wastewater stuff gets funded a different way through a wastewater authority of some kind?
Yeah, so the $2 billion is really just to help us get through and upgrade our stormwater systems throughout the city to what you'd call a sufficient level of service for a 10-year storm event, never mind the levels of the massive storm events that we've seen. So that's $2 billion in upgrading the stormwater systems there. That doesn't even include all of the shoreline defenses that we're spending over $100 million on right now as it relates to specifically sea level rise and the tidal flooding. The septic to sewer conversion, there's over 15,000 residents here in the city of Hollywood whose properties were developed with septic tanks. And as you mentioned, when the water table is as high as it's getting and when the flooding is becoming what it is from rainstorms, that doesn't allow the septic systems and their connected drain fields to work. And we do not look forward to the day when those fail to the point of sewage, finding itself mixed with floodwaters. And so it's a real big problem. The estimate for the septic to sewer conversion at our last go around, I would say around 4 years ago, and prices have gone up since, back then was about $500 million. So we're north of $2.5 billion just to cover these threats from climate impacts that are impacting the wastewater systems that we have here in the system, and of course the stormwater management.
For a population of roughly how many folks? I don't know Hollywood as well as I should.
Yeah, 154,000 residents, and mind you, when you look at the cost of property insurance, the cost of just home ownership in general in South Florida, layer on top of that the property insurance, and then the city having no choice but having to ask our customers, our ratepayers, our residents to tax themselves or to pay more on their utility bills. There's only so far you can go to the resident and say, we need more for this, we need more for that, when their insurance is killing them already. And so it really is creating a real big problem, because the same people that are forced to pay higher insurance premiums, it's hard to ask them, to accept a higher utility fee and local property taxes to cover the infrastructure upgrades.
Yeah, and I'm not a math major, but 15,000 people having to cough up $500 million for the sewer upgrades, that ends up being a pretty big number for folks who have to pay for that connection.
Yeah, the math just doesn't work. And so actually we had to go to the state legislature this year to have them pass a bill that would allow us to circumvent some older Florida law that would limit it to those, specifically those customers that would be connecting to the new sewer system, and enable us to pay and finance through all 40,000+ ratepayers, some of which are already on sewer. But nonetheless, it's still really an unaffordable amount. We're going to have to borrow and pay back with interest over decades for it.
Yeah, which is an interesting problem, because often when a municipality or a family has to go into debt in order to deal with an unexpected event, like a sickness in the family or a hurricane that blows through town or whatever it is, you spread those costs over time because you expect that the cause of those costs is a one-time or occasional thing. It's not going to be happening year in and year out. If it's going to be happening year in and year out, that changes your economics pretty dramatically, doesn't it?
Yeah, and to Senator Warren's point, if we don't mitigate and be able to protect our cities and our homes in a more sufficient way and leave ourselves exposed in the same manner as we were yesterday to what we know is coming today and tomorrow, then really we're doing ourselves a disservice and are going to continue to suffer, recurring losses that at some point become so unsustainable that people reconsider where they're going to live and how they're going to live. And so as a municipality and as a mayor, I certainly don't want to see that ever happen to our beautiful coastal city. And so we do, want to make sure that climate change can be stopped and can be, we can be more responsible with carbon emissions and reduce the trend, fortify what we need, but at the same time, make some forward progress. And to think that we're not going to and exacerbate the risk is not going to lead to a good place financially for our homeowners or just really for the livability of our communities here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to turn to Senator Padilla from California, who has arrived. He's a little bit more on the wildfire side, but he gets a little bit of coastal flooding as well, so he sees it on both ends. Just one quick question before I let you go, Mayor. Are you seeing people who also have well systems, or is everybody in Hollywood pretty much on piped water?
We're on a city water system.
Okay.
We do have some wells, but the wells are really for irrigation.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry so much right now about saltwater intrusion into wells.
Oh, trust me, we do worry about that. We would have to, even our own municipal wells, we might have to move westward because of saltwater intrusion. That's a whole other element that we didn't get into, but that's a here and now issue. And yes, our water utilities, we're all looking at that and studying that, and the higher tides are really increasing that intrusion. We have a limestone, system here, a subterranean system, and it's porous. And we're seeing and we're measuring the saltwater intrusion, year after year.
So even if individual homeowners don't have wells, your municipal water system that serves them fresh drinking water does come from wells, and so you have the same problem.
Indeed.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, proud to represent California, where at a minimum, we're increasingly concerned about the impact of wildfires, but we are no strangers to the impact of sustained drought, the impact of growing impact of atmospheric rivers, the flooding that they cause, and more. So we're seeing at all ends of the climate change spectrum. Let me take a moment to thank all of our witnesses for participating, those of you in person, Mr. Mayor, virtually, as the representative of the other Hollywood. Just want to thank you for your service. We should do some sort of an exchange program. We'll come visit, you come visit. There's a lot to learn from each other. But getting to the topic at hand here, I think as you all know, the Treasury Department's Federal Insurance Office report from January underscores what we in California have known for a long time now, that while this issue may be more prominent, may be more intense in what are considered disaster-prone areas, of the United States. The reality is that there is no region in the country that's exempt or immune from the increasing severe threats posed by climate change. I see a lot of heads nodding in the audience, so I'm glad this is striking a chord here. The impacts are no longer confined to just the coastal or historically high-risk areas that have been the focus of conversation and some of the research that's now available. But because we see the impacts now extending to every community, including reaching inland areas and regions that have in the past been considered low risk. This is further illustrated by the number of new and expanded state-based mitigation programs to support not just home hardening on an individual basis. I think Senator Warren was articulate with that in her comments and her questions, but also to community-wide resilience projects, which Chairman or Ranking Member Whitehouse and I have spoken about repeatedly in the insurance context. So I want to take a moment to highlight a bill that I've worked on with Senators Tillis, Schiff, and Cassidy that would exempt from federal income taxes the payments from these programs so that our constituents can realize the maximum funding available towards risk mitigation and resilience measures. Dr. Mulder, you mentioned in your testimony that evidence-based policymaking will require more data to determine which adaptation measures are actually cost-effective, which are most cost-effective. Given the challenges that Treasury faced just in collecting data for its January report, how can the federal government more effectively coordinate the collection of this important information?
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Yes, I completely agree that data collection is going to be the cornerstone of how to effectively expand out these programs. Right? There's only going to be so many resources that we can commit, and in addition, these sorts of measures can have real cost for homeowners. So you want to do the things that are going to really reduce losses and premiums enough to justify the investment. And we've seen, so for example, in data with some of the new building codes that California introduced throughout the 2000s, there's papers, just looking at which homes are burned down after a fire, and it's extremely striking. You see the homes built just after the new codes, much less likely to be burned down. This will eventually translate into lower premiums for homeowners, so this will absolutely be part of the solution. The data collection effort by the Federal Insurance Office is an extremely valuable step in this direction, and you're right that there were some challenges. So for example, my understanding is that data collection efforts in Florida, for example, were significantly hampered. So I think that one step that will be necessary is to try to get something that's increasingly representative. And granularity is also going to be key here. Risk is extremely local. It varies house by house. And insurers view their data on claims as proprietary, right? They're businesses. They're not trying to help everyone else figure out who has the risk. But as policymakers, we are interested in the bigger picture as we try to set policy. So the federal government absolutely has a role to play in terms of being a sort of central place where that sort of data can be gathered, used by researchers, used by policymakers to find solutions.
It's I think an appropriate balance to strive for, right? How much of the property by property more granular data to help inform the policy making, not just for insurers, but for us, with some of that community-wide data. Because you, as an individual homeowner, can do all the right things. Your architecture, your design, your building materials, your roof, your siding, your brush clearance, and the creation of defensible space. But if the neighbors around you aren't taking such care and concern, you're compromised. So there's a lot of value in collecting that aggregate data from a community-wide standpoint as well. But let me also ask you about federal data collection and policy making. A lot of states have state-specific programs. How can state-based programs better support communities, particularly those that have historically not faced disasters at this scale?
That's right. Thank you. And I also wanted to just mention what you said about, yes, at the community level, that's absolutely where much of adaptation has to happen. This isn't individual efforts. Stories that have struck me are individual homeowners who built incredibly resilient homes, and then they're the last ones standing in the entire neighborhood. What's the point of returning to your house at that point if everything around you is gone? And homeowners insurance is indeed, this organized at a state level. And that means that state departments of insurance are going to have a big role to play. I see one valuable role is, so I've seen, for example, I think California has versions of this, Alabama has versions of this with its fortified roof program, Florida also has versions of this, certification for homeowners who take, certain adaptive efforts or meet certain construction standards. I think, and I've seen cases too, where then that leads to sort of negotiated discounts and premiums with insurers operating in the states. I think that's helpful for homeowners because it lets them know what discount they'll get by being able to meet these standards. And I think it can be helpful for insurers because it means that instead of each insurer having to, evaluate these properties on their own, there's a central source of information for which homes have met these standards and which homes are safe.
And if I may, Senator Whitehouse, I want to talk a couple questions on the insurance challenges that we've been spending so much time on. As insurers withdraw from markets or threaten to withdraw from markets, but in many cases actually withdrawing from markets due to the increasing risks that they point to posed by climate change, the net effect on consumers is that they're left with fewer and fewer options for homeowners insurance. This leaves homeowners in a difficult position, often forced to accept plans that may not fully cover their needs simply because there were no additional alternatives. So we're struggling to ensure that there's affordable and meaningful insurance options for homeowners. These limitations are impacting access and the overall health of the mortgage market itself, because if you can't insure your home, then you can't get a mortgage for that home purchase. So addressing this challenge requires ensuring that insurance markets function properly to provide that affordable, comprehensive, meaningful insurance options for consumers. And as we've seen, state and federal backstops have become neither affordable nor sustainable in the long term. And while states should remain the primary regulators of insurance, increasingly people are wondering what the federal role can be in either buttressing those markets or offering alternatives. Dr. Mulder, has the mortgage market already begun to see the knock-on effects of the property insurance crisis because of disasters?
There is growing evidence that mortgage markets are being affected by the trends that we're seeing in the homeowners insurance market. As we've seen this period of unprecedented increase in premiums, that's been tied to mortgage performance data, and we see that when people have a sudden increase in their premium, that tends to lead them to fall behind on their payments. And after a disaster, you often see cases where people are underinsured, and that can again sort of lead to issues around prepayment of mortgages, difficulty in getting a new mortgage, difficulty in rebuilding a home fully, or in cases where homeowners might sell instead of rebuilding because you don't have the ability to get a mortgage to rebuild, you don't have the ability to use your homeowner's coverage to rebuild. And so you see that increasing turnover in these communities. So absolutely, the homeowners insurance market, ideally, it should be this boring thing that sort of supports the mortgage market and is saying that people don't have to think about. But what we're seeing is that it's becoming a real barrier to efficient home transactions.
Are there any legislative proposals that you're aware of currently in Congress that would help solve the problem here? And I'm not talking about bailing out industry, whether it's on the mortgage side or on the insurance side. That's just a Band-Aid. Any true legislative proposals that are part of the solution here?
I can't speak to any specific legislative proposals at this point, and it's always going to get bogged down in the details on these things, right? But what I can speak to at a high level, when I think about the way that state fair plans work, these insurers of last resort, the logic of insurers is generally to pool their risk. And at the state level, that's a difficult thing to pull off, right? You're kind of by definition probably looking at a lot of policyholders who face the same risks. So the problem, as you said, you frame it as a bailout of the insurers. You don't want the insurer of last resort to be the one ending up with all the policies that no one else wants. At the end of the day, someone does have to bear this risk, and in terms of the prices, you want those to reflect the risk, promote adaptation in terms of where people build. So I think that's the tension if in any such program would be to be having a rating structure. The federal government has an ability to bear this catastrophic risk potentially if you think of them as an insurer of last resort, but you'd want the prices to reflect the very real risk that's happening in this market.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Hill, you described Florence coming through Wilmington and dumping 30 inches of rain,
Yes,
flooding out whole subdivisions.
right.
You've lived in Wilmington for many years now?
31 years, yes.
31 years. What are the changes you've seen in Wilmington since Florence that,
Well, the only thing that, well, the main thing is, I mentioned before, is we've rezoned areas that are now zoned as flooding areas. Before, those that weren't zoned flooding, as flood zones, didn't pay insurance for it, so the homeowners lost their homes. So they're being more specific. I think that, but that also makes people have to pay an additional, because we're east of I-95, we now have a third insurance we have to pay for the flood. I think that some of the we have had some approaches from some of the insurance companies to replace our roofs for a certain level of stability. But when you're on a fixed income or even a normal income, somebody comes along and says, oh, if you replace your roof for $15,000, we're going to lower your insurance. And so you're saying, well, $15,000 is a big chunk out of somebody's paycheck. And how soon will that pay itself off? So I think
particularly if insurers are leaving?
yes. And so we have, our city itself has done a lot for clean air. We've tried to make the government buildings more appropriate for climate change and things like that. But our area, even our county, are pretty well aware of climate change, and both sides of the aisle, if you will, are really concerned about how the climate is changing in our area. And
Boy, we could use some of that here.
yes.
So you describe how your cost increase for this has been about 10% every single year, which
Right.
piles up pretty fast, and now it's a full month of your
Social
Social
Security.
Security income that goes out to the property insurer before anything else.
And I have a pretty good Social Security. A lot of people don't have as much as I do.
Yeah.
on Social Security. But
And that in order to protect yourself, you've had to gamble with
Yes.
less coverage in order to keep that insurance down. How does that feel? Is that one of the things that keeps you up at night, or how do?
Well, I don't like it when it rains for 3 days. I start getting a little nervous. I do sometimes wonder if I'm, penny wise and pound foolish, that I'm like, what happens if everything really, if we get another hurricane? And we haven't had one on our side. The mountains got the horrible hurricane this year, so, but it is something to think about. And even when a hurricane doesn't come immediately to Wilmington, if it even comes to Charleston or any of those areas, we still get a lot of wind. It might not be a level, even a Category 1, but we still get a lot of wind. And then you have to worry about whether you're going to be covered. If it's a named storm, they'll cover it, but if it's not, you're never quite sure what's going to happen. And there's a big deductible. I think it's over $1,300 per claim deductible. So, you sort of wonder if you should pay more or not.
So what's your advice from Wilmington, North Carolina to us here?
Well, I feel that, this is my advice, I feel that people need to be more aware, the average person has to be more aware of what the climate change is really doing. I think people over the years say, oh, it didn't snow like that when I was young, or we never had those hurricanes. But it happens so quietly that people aren't aware. And if more people would aware, I think all of the Congress would have to pay attention to it, not just the ones that are already paying attention to it. And it really is a crisis. It's a crisis for the whole world, but it's really a crisis in the United States, I believe.
Thank you. Mr. Nathan, you catch it twice you described in your testimony. You get it as a homeowner in Texas. You're in the Houston area?
Correct.
You get it as a homeowner there, and you also get it as a small business owner there. And in your testimony, you say it's piled up to the point now where you're even thinking of having to relocate. Now, packing up a lifetime's worth of stuff is a terrible ordeal. So,
Tell me about it, Senator.
yeah. So the fact that you even have to think about that is pretty telling. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, and a lot of my friends are getting in this frame of mind is that these tropical cyclone storms that threaten us and hit us, it's no longer worth it. I mean, it's not just the damage too, but people have lost power for weeks before it's restored. And depending on what your business is, it comes to a halt. It takes a while for the wounds to heal from these storms. And in Houston, I divided my time there 41 years in half. And the first half, I could only recall what people call now a polar vortex with the ice and we don't do well with ice in Houston. There's a gazillion auto accidents when that happens. And we have rolling blackouts. And then we had Tropical Storm Allison in 2001, which was a major flooding event and loss of life. But in the recent 20.5 years, we've had Hurricane Ike destroyed lots of property on Galveston and Bolivar Peninsula. I was out of power for 8 days. We had a heat dome in 2011 that killed over 300 million trees in Texas, and 5.6 of those were urban trees, and that's $93 billion lost, estimated. We've had major flooding events not connected to cyclones. We had Tax Day flood in 2016, Memorial Day flood in 2017, which was the 14th costliest flood in American history. And then Hurricane Harvey in 2017, 100 people died, $125 billion in damages. That ties Katrina. And we had another polar vortex in 2021. A year ago, we had that derecho windstorm, which lots of trees down, lots of damage. I incurred some damage. Downtown Houston, glass blown out of all the skyscrapers, and they're still not completely replaced. There's still hundreds of windows still boarded up. And then we had Hurricane Beryl in July of last year. Same thing, high winds, tornadoes, flooding, 42 people dead in Houston. So you get to a point where how many times can you take that punch in the gut? You know, maybe I need to move away from my friends, you know, and if I'm going to retire, I can say I can leave the business part of it. But I have lots of friends and activities and things I'm involved in that my life would change a lot to pack up and move. I'm not sure I'm ready to do that.
Yeah. Is it a pretty broad topic of conversation and concern among people you know in the Houston area?
Oh, it's very broad, yeah. I think one of the most frightening things to people, other than severe damage, just is losing power for days or weeks upon end. And, you know, summer in Houston, not very good without air conditioning. I did not lose power during Beryl, and I invited friends to come over and stay cool, and some people needed to do business, so I used my internet, you know, help them through that time.
Well, thank you. We've been joined by, we had Senator Padilla, your senior senator, in that seat just a moment ago. So Senator Schiff is here from California to join us. Let me turn to him.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse, and thank you for your leadership on climate. Senator Whitehouse is our champion of the environment in the Congress, and so proud to serve with him. And yes, I saw Senator Padilla on his way out. We literally did a handoff on the way in and out of the committee room. He may have asked you this question already, so forgive me, but Dr. Mulder, I wanted to ask you, in California, we've been increasingly reliant on our state insurer of last resort, the California FAIR Plan. It has significantly increased in recent years with policies increasing by 18%, the number of policies from 2022 to 2023. So dramatic expansion of the insurer of last resort. What can we expect of this increasing concentration of risk impacting state insurance and housing markets. What do you think the result of these massive LA fires is going to be on the financial viability of the state's own insurance plan? Love your thoughts on those issues.
Certainly, yes. Thank you, Senator Schiff. And Senator Pete did ask something along these lines, but I'm always happy to talk about insurers of last resort. So happy for the opportunity. So certainly what you see in the Growing Fair Plan is, first an evidence of weakness in the private homeowners insurance market. And while an insurer of last resort can help provide some stability to the homeowners who need some kind of insurance to, say, buy a home, things like that, at the end of the day, the risk is still there, and it still has to be borne by someone. And if you look beyond the FAIR Plan, it is being borne by the state and really the entire citizens of the state. And what that means is that ultimately, yes, this becomes a risk on the state's portfolio. And normally, when you think about insurers and the way that they operate ideally, they're spreading the risks. But when a state insurer of last resort, by sort of definition, has its risks concentrated. In terms of housing markets, this means that residents, even if they're not on the FAIR Plan, are aware that this is a potential risk for them in terms of assessments. And it means that they also know that they could end up on the FAIR Plan where you are still paying pretty high premiums for often relatively inadequate coverage. So we have seen some evidence that these rising homeowners insurance premium stress in these markets has led to kind of a slowing of home price appreciation in some markets, as well as, growing, say, delinquencies in the mortgage market.
So what are we to make of the insurers that are leaving states like California or Florida or refusing to write new policies? How much should we accept of their argument that they don't find it lucrative or even able to stay afloat? Or is it they're just finding more lucrative markets elsewhere? Clearly, climate is driving this on the one hand. On the other hand, what should we make of these claims of poverty by the insurance companies?
Well, they're businesses, right? So they are going to go to places where they think it will be profitable to underwrite policies, and they're also, with, say, limited capital, they're going to deploy it in the places where they think they'll have the highest return. And insurers write one-year policies, and this means that they can turn relatively quickly when they think that a market is heading south, and they can wait for conditions to improve for them to have more certainty about the risk. From the perspective of policymakers, homeowners, people in communities, this is not a year-by-year situation. We can't get up and move our homes in a single year. So it's a gap, right? It's a function, it's a type of risk mitigation. An insurer, you can buy a policy and you can be assured that if you lose your home, you'll receive up to this amount of coverage to rebuild. But they are not selling insurance that you might not be able to buy a policy the next year or that your premium might double next year. That's something that ultimately is going to come down to questions of resiliency, adaptation, and policy.
So when homeowners take action to mitigate, let's say, risk of fire, they do the brush clearance work, they do everything else they should do, they do everything we encourage them to do or require them to do, it should result in insurers being able to reduce rates because their exposure is less. What is your experience? Does that ever really materialize? Do you ever see insurers say, hey, you've taken these important mitigation steps, we're going to show that in the form of a reduced premium? Or do they, in a way, just pocket the difference? And if it's the latter, what is the right mechanism to make sure that when homeowners take steps to mitigate risk, that it's reflected in the price of the policies they're paying?
So for every insurer, and for that matter, for every state, for every insurer, you're going to see practices that are a little bit different. And this is because every insurer kind of follows their own practices for underwriting, for trying to assess risks and to set rates. Some insurers have a strategy of, trying to make underwriting as fast and low cost as possible to try to get the most customers. And, they might not catch every method of adaptation. Other insurers might be a little more careful about which risks they write and how they set rates. Where I have seen some degree of success, and I think this is something that could be implementable as a policy solution, is, for example, Alabama, I know, has a roof program for fortified roof standards, and they both have a grant program for individuals to retrofit their homes to meet those standards, and the Department of Insurance there has negotiated discounts with the insurers of, how much lower your premium is when you meet these standards. So I think that's one way to give more certainty to homeowners about what kind of deal they're going to get. And it can also provide more information to the insurers. Instead of every single one having to go out and assess these properties on their own, it can create a more central source of information about which homes are resilient. I think in the long run, this market, I agree, year to year there's a lot of froth, and some years insurers make money and some years they don't. But I do think that over time, as claims fall, the market is reasonably competitive. We should expect to see that, steps to improve resiliency among homes will lead to lower costs over time. But I think there is a role for the government to help that along.
Seems like a very opportune moment for me to plug my very first bill as a member of the Senate, which is to create a tax credit for those who use more resilient materials to rebuild their home or build their home in advance of a disaster. Do I have time to ask a couple more questions?
I'll wrap up after you're done, and we can let the witnesses go.
A couple of things. One is, I don't know how much you've talked about the impact on small businesses. There's a lot of focus on the impact on residents of not being able to insure their homes or the escalating cost. But I've noticed a lot of California small business owners can't get insurance for their businesses anymore because they're at the same risk of fire or other natural disaster. How much of this is a problem you're seeing in the business community?
Mr. Neaton is a small business owner.
Oh, perfect.
Yes, Senator Schiff. I've been with the same business insurer for 25 years, and my premiums were, for this coming year, well, I just renewed, or needed to renew here in March, we're going to jump $400. And as a small business owner, I really have to manage costs. Things can get out of control really quickly. So I was forced to shop around for another insurer for my business. And, that takes time, that takes research. And I mentioned in my testimony that a colleague of mine, he built a structure on his property in 2016 that would house his office and his digital production work, printers, computers, everything. And his insurer is dropping him because they don't want to insure a frame building, even though it's relatively new and it was built to the modern codes. And I wouldn't be surprised that that's very common out there.
Well, thank you. Last question. To what degree are we seeing the housing market impacted in the sense that people qualify with the bank in terms of their ability to pay a mortgage, but they can't get insurance and therefore the transaction doesn't go through? Are we seeing an impact on the liquidity or fluidity within the housing market because people can't get through the step of insuring their home to get the mortgage?
I'd be happy to speak a little bit on that. It's hard to say say from a bird's eye view data perspective exactly what steps insurance might be gained in the way of housing transactions. But what we have seen is as payments go up, mortgage delinquencies also rise. I'm struck, again, this isn't a formal data analysis, but I'm struck that now we're seeing very high rates of unsold inventory in Florida and other parts of the coast, and that's one area that's seeing cooling home prices, especially relative to the rest of the country. So it's of course natural and not surprising that as people face these higher premiums, that's getting reflected in home prices to some extent, and that also you have to pay a full year of premiums when you buy that home. And if that is going from $2,000 to suddenly being $8,000 in some of these markets, that's a substantial extra cost relative to down payments. So I think when we talk about homeowners who are trying to save a lot for that down payment in the first place, and this can be a surprisingly high cost that they face at closing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I'm sure it is affecting home values in areas that are considered flood-prone or fire-prone. I was alluding to a separate but related difficulty, and that is that people find their dream home and then find they can't finish the process of getting a mortgage because they can't get an insurance policy for it, and the transaction falls apart. So I'm sure you're seeing both.
Yeah, what I'll take the opportunity to say is this is something else that's come up is the need for more data in this space. And that's a great example of the kind of, for example, say the FHFA through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would have insight into how often that happens as they monitor loan closing. So that's a great example. Like, how much is this going on? That's something that we'll need more data to answer.
We certainly hear about
Thank
it
you.
anecdotally from realtors in particular who would like to see these deals close, and then suddenly they don't. If you don't mind me wrapping up here, Mayor Levy, thank you very much for being here. I saw an interesting statistic the other day which said that claims for Hurricane Debbie that were submitted to Citizens Property Insurance, the state-backed insurer in Florida, experienced 75% outright denials. And there's been some talk about how in Florida there's a very significant fraud concern. But it strikes me as wildly exaggerated to think that 75% of Floridians are engaged in fraud after a hurricane blows through. What has been your constituents' experience with getting claims paid by Citizens Property Insurance? Is falling into the warm embrace of Citizens Property Insurance viewed as a homecoming by Floridians, or is it, oh my gosh, what are you doing to me now?
Yeah, it's terrible because the coverage, scope of coverage continues to be reduced year after year, to the point where you could have a named storm and maybe a particular occurrence during that storm. The insurance company would like to say that its policy language that it's been able to, reduce coverage with year after year, now exempts them from covering, a claim. And so it is terrible that, as was discussed today, that with increasing, risk of loss with regards for the climate-driven risks, you do also have at the same time rising premiums, but also reduced coverage.
Yeah.
And that's a good example, Senator, of where we are today. It's a really broken system. Something's got to be done. The insurer of last resort is not much of a last resort when they're denying claims at a wholesale level.
Yeah, no kidding. And one of the things that we've done a lot of work on in the Senate Budget Committee has been non-renewal, where the insurance company says to the homeowner who may have been a loyal customer for many years, sorry, your property is just too risky for us, and so we're gonna have to let you go. Are you hearing about non-renewals spiking around Florida from your constituents and others?
Sure, certainly non-renewals are a problem, and I will tell you, as the professor had testified, it does sound as if there ought to be perhaps regulation or law that says that if we are going to allow you to be an insurance company, you must accept policies from whether it's national level, specific geographic area. If we're going to continue to allow insurance companies to pick and choose who they want to insure and cherry pick the market, as you all have been saying, the result is the inability to obtain insurance or the price being so high that it's unaffordable. So certainly I think, and while I love to let the marketplace, be the marketplace, it seems that specifically in the insurance world, it behooves us that we need regulation and minimum, standards that have the force of law. Otherwise, it's going to continue to get worse.
Ms. Hill, as you talk about this problem in your circles in Wilmington, does the question of insurance companies failing to renew insurance policies come up?
We haven't had a problem with the failure to renew their policy, but I hang out with a bunch of 70-year-olds, youngsters, and we talk about how our properties are increasing and our insurance premiums are increasing, and almost all of them are on fixed income, and just concerned that when is this going to stop? I mean, we want to outlive our insurance premiums, and so how long can we afford to stay in our homes? And all of us live in our own single-family homes, and it's a threat. It's another concern that we see in Wilmington, in New Hanover County, actually.
Mr. Neaton, are you hearing either from fellow homeowners or small business owners around the Houston area about non-renewals being an issue?
I've heard some stories, and I've also noticed that some friends have chosen to go with companies offering lower premium rates, but don't have a good reputation for paying claims.
Yeah.
So it's a gamble.
Yeah, that word has now come up twice, both from Ms. Hill and from you, the gamble. It's not a good thing when a product that is supposed to provide you security is instead a gamble. Ms. Hill mentioned that she'd seen 10% year after year increases in her homeowner's insurance. Just to let you know, Mr. Neaton, that in Texas, 2022 was the last year that had a 10% increase in average homeowners property insurance in Texas. 2023, it was 21%. 2024, it was 18%. When you start stacking those increases on top of each other, that I think helps explain why Professor Mulder testified that we have a 48% national increase in property insurance just in the last few years. You all bringing those stories here to share with us has been really important. I know that as the mayor, to have this many hours of an afternoon be dedicated to this is not probably the absolutely best use of your time from your constituents' point of view, but it really made a difference to us to have an elected official of a community so in harm's way here with us to bring your constituents' voices into this room and to all of us. So thank you to my fellow elected official, Mayor Levy. Thank you, Professor Mulder. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Thank you, Mr. Neaton. You guys have been terrific. And with that, we are concluded.
Thank you.